Χαίρετε, καλώς ήρθατε σε ένα ακόμα podcast των theSPEAKERS. Είμαι ο Απόστολος Κουμαρίνος και κάθε Τετάρτη από τις 5 ώρα το πρωί μπορείτε να βρείτε ένα νέο podcast διαθέσιμο στις πλατφόρμες Google και Apple Podcasts, καθώς επίσης και στο Spotify. Μπορείτε να ξεκινάτε την ημέρα σας ή όποτε ακούτε το podcast με αγάπη, με όρεξη για τη ζωή, με δύναμη, με ενέργεια, με πάθος. Κάθε φορά δίνουμε την ψυχή μας, δίνουμε ό,τι περισσότερο μπορούμε για να πάμε μαζί ένα βήμα πιο μακριά. Για να κάνουμε μαζί αυτό το ταξίδι προς τα μέσα μας, προς το μέσα μας. Αυτό το αέναο ταξίδι που πιθανώς να μην τελειώνει ποτέ. Όπως πάντα πάμε γρήγορα στο θέμα, δεν χάνουμε άλλο χρόνο. Σήμερα έχω δύο εξαιρετικούς καλεσμένους, τους οποίους θαυμάζω και μάλλον έχετε ήδη ακούσει για αυτούς. Θα μάθετε περισσότερα σε λίγο, αλλά όπως πάντα πάμε να ξεκινήσουμε με ένα απόσπασμα από το βιβλίο 10% πιο ευτυχισμένος από εκδόσεις Keybooks και από τον συγγραφέα χωρίς. Αυτό λοιπόν που έχουμε επιλέξει σήμερα το απόσπασμα μιλάει για το διαλογισμό, το οποίο σχετίζεται πλήρως με αυτά τα οποία πρόκειται να συζητήσουμε. Το κείμενο λοιπόν έχει τον εξής τίτλο: «Να διαλογίζεσαι». Και λέει: «Ο διαλογισμός είναι η υπερδύναμη που καθιστά δυνατές τις υπόλοιπες αρχές. Έχει αναρρύθμιτα ωφέλη, από καλύτερη υγεία μέχρι αυξημένη ικανότητα συγκέντρωσης και βαθύτερη αίσθηση ηρεμίας. Όμως, το πιο σημαντικό είναι η ικανότητα να δράς και όχι να αντιδράς, σύμφωνα με τις παρονμήσεις και τις ανάγκες σου. Ζούμε τη ζωή μας με βάση τι μας αρέσει και τι απεχθανόμαστε. Με τον διαλογισμό, αντί να υποκύπτεις αυτές τις βαθιά ριζωμένες εξαρτήσεις του μυαλού, απλώς παρατηρείς οτιδήποτε αναδύεται στο νου χωρίς να ασκείς κριτική». Με αυτό το απόσπασμα λοιπόν, και για να μπορέσω να συνεχίσω αυτά τα οποία θα μοιραστούμε σήμερα μαζί σας, θα περάσω στην αγγλική. Σήμερα είναι το πρώτο μας λοιπόν αγγλόφωνο podcast, μιας και οι καλεσμένοι μου δεν μιλούν την ελληνική. Έρχονται από το εξωτερικό, πιο συγκεκριμένα έρχονται από την Ιταλία. Θα μάθετε περισσότερα πράγματα σε λίγο. Και βέβαια μπορώ να πω ότι είναι δύο άνθρωποι που πραγματικά με έχουν επηρεάσει έντονα και μου έχουν αλλάξει ένα βασικό κομμάτι της ζωής μου. Είναι οι εισηγητές, οι άνθρωποι που πραγματοποίησαν το retreat στο οποίο βρέθηκα τον Αύγουστο στην Ιταλία και με έχετε ακούσει να μιλάω γι' αυτό. 2 εβδομάδες χωρίς κινητά, με αφωνία, χωρίς οπτική επαφή, με φαγητό πρωί και μεσημέρι, με vegan διατροφή και με πολύ ωραίο διαλογισμό. Σε αυτούς τους ανθρώπους λοιπόν οφείλω πολλά. Είμαι πάρα πολύ χαρούμενος που είναι εδώ σήμερα και με την ευκαιρία αυτή με βοηθούν σήμερα να κάνουμε αυτό το πρώτο μας βήμα και να κάνουμε το πρώτο μας αγγλόφωνο podcast. Οπότε πάμε μαζί να γυρίσουμε να κάνουμε αυτό το βήμα. Γυρνάω λοιπόν στην αγγλική και Arpita Arjuna, welcome. It's great to have you here, guys. I was saying before that it's of great importance to me that you are here with me today, that I met you about 3 months ago in the retreat that you held in Italy, and that actually you changed my life after that. These 12 days were pretty life-changing for me. So it's a great thing, a great honor that we made it. You're here on this day. So thank you so much. Arpita and Arjuna, welcome, guys.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So today we will talk and you will guide us on the meditation. What meditation means. What exactly is it? We will talk about your approach, your point of view on meditation. You will share some things right about that. But before we do that, okay, I would like to share a short story. About 3 months ago, I came to your retreat, right? In this beautiful town in Tuscany that is called Pescia, right? This 12-day retreat at the beginning was quite strange for me. I didn't know what to expect, right? 12 days without mobile phones, without visual contact, staying in silence, with vegan and some vegetarian nutrition, 6 hours, 5 hours and something of meditation every day. That was, at the beginning, something that I didn't know what to expect, okay? When the days were unfolding and I was in that experience, things started changing for me. I mean, like, at the end, I didn't want to leave the place. And right now, 3 months after, I've made important changes in my life that have helped me both in my professional and personal life. And that's why you're here for, because I couldn't do these changes for the past 2.5 years. And in only 12 days, with the way that you have set up the retreat, you've helped me do the changes. I don't know, is there anything you would like to share on your why? Why are you doing this behind the retreat? What is your reason? And then we can start our discussion about meditation.
Well, first of all, I want to say that all we can do from our side is create the best conditions we can create for people coming on retreat. But actually, all the changes that happened in your life after that, it was through your own willingness to show up for yourself and for the process that has started to unfold within you. We can just hold the best space for this transformation or whatever you want to call it. But you got to do the work. And in your case, you were just ready, willing, and excited to do the work. And from my perspective, I guess offering this gift of meditation, of mindfulness to others is really the best thing I can do with my life. That's how I live through it. I cannot imagine doing anything more meaningful, more important with my life in the times we live in, especially, than offering this to people, this coming back home to ourselves, because this is part of the experience of coming back on retreat or coming back to stillness, to our breath, to meditation.
Yeah, in a way, we might be a little bit out of place here in a podcast of the speakers, because we're kind of the silent ones. We kind of do the opposite professionally. But what that means really is going into silence, as much as a lot of people don't really know what that means or what that would do, brings about different effects in different ways for every person. And we are the last ones to have any control over this. As Arpita said, we really just create conditions that allow for each retreater to unfold, to let their process unfold by itself. And we mostly step out of the way, really. And even though we give some instructions and create some kind of framework, it is amazing how much of the retreat is really each practitioner's own impetus and potential that just needed room to really blossom, if you will.
Yeah, I can confirm that from my own experience. It's totally true what you said. And I remember that I was wearing the speaker's t-shirt and we were in complete silence. So it was quite provoking every day with my the speaker's t-shirt on the silent retreat. Okay, great. Okay, so what can someone say about meditation? Why would we meditate? Is there anything to gain from that? You know, I'm talking from the other side right now. Why would someone meditate in this modern world?
Usually, meditation is very poorly understood. And that is because it's not easy to understand. The main reason is that it could be defined almost as going beyond the mind. Now, if we go beyond the mind, then the mind struggles to understand. We're literally going beyond the scope that we're usually familiar with, that we live in. The way that we experience the world is, of course, through the filter of the mind, through the terminology of the mind. The process of living unfolds in the mind. So, if there is anything beyond the mind, first of all, what is that? And how can the mind make sense of it, right? So there's many ways of understanding meditation, but a simple one is to say we go beyond the mind. And the mind needs to be ready for this. So when you ask, why would I meditate? Why go on retreat? The question almost disappears in the sense that there is a certain moment in our self-development where we get curious. What else is there in life? Is there something else than what I know? Is there something beyond the familiar, beyond the physical and energetic that kind of defines our world? Is there something more, right? So that can be triggered through an experience that we perhaps can't explain, somewhere where we come to the edge of our familiarity with existence, where existential questions come up. Usually when we've all heard of those questions, we all know that science, for instance, has no answers to the questions of why are we here? What is our purpose? What comes next, right? So when those questions become urgent, when we somehow get confronted with the emptiness of answers that the world presents to us, then we might get curious to use tools like meditation or retreating to find our own truth, to find it beyond the mind, beyond language.
And if I may pick up from here and bring this to also a more day-to-day level, we kind of run through life at a great speed right now. And so through meditation, we can really calm down the habitual anxieties and fluctuations of the mind. Even though we may live a comfortable life and acknowledge that we may be relatively happy, we are often still tormented by the anxieties, by the stress, by the internalized pressure that is generated by the constant input of the mind, the constant evaluation, the constant judging. And so when we come into contact with this present moment through the power of meditation, then we can actually just sit back in the natural state of our being. And this can be incredibly wholesome for really any human being.
Do you believe that it's kind of difficult for someone living in a big city, let's say, having stressful rhythms, working rhythms every day, to sit down with himself and relax for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever that time might be, for meditating?
You're asking if it's difficult?
Yes, and what did it work for you when you first started in order to put meditation in your life, let's say?
Well, I would say it may be difficult to just reorganize our daily routine, but especially if we live a busy, stressful life, it is almost the most important thing we can do for ourselves, to actually slow down, especially for a few minutes, especially just carving out 10, 15 minutes to sit in silence, to sit with ourselves, to relax the body, to connect with our breath. This is not incredibly difficult, actually.
Well, you're probably aware neuroscience has actually explored meditation quite a lot by now, over the decades that it's been in the Western world. And it's been found that the benefits of even 5 minutes of meditation in a day are incredible, are measurable, are reproducible, reliable, and are really profound. And the reason for that is probably that, especially in this day and age where the pace of our lives is often really very fast, where we're used to an instant gratification of our senses. Like I still grew up in a way where when I wanted to learn something, to know something, I had to pretty much go to the library and find the right book and read, and then eventually maybe I know the answer. Nowadays, we have basically the knowledge of our civilization on a device in our pockets. And what do? Well, mostly we look at cat pictures, meaning we don't fully use the potential of the technology around us, but we're used to it, meaning we don't have a lot of patience to find an answer to something. We are living in a fast-paced world that makes us used to information, solutions, the next thing being immediately available. And that is kind of at odds with meditation, in the sense that meditation hasn't changed because the nature of the mind hasn't changed. We've evolved to have a mind that ticks differently, that changes very slowly and reluctantly. And so in meditation, we slow down to our more natural rhythm that we are accustomed to evolutionarily, if you will. We come back to something almost ancient that we've perhaps lost track of, that we've gotten out of touch with. Just like when we go to nature in some form on the weekend, and without realizing it, we kind of reconnect to something that we might not even have noticed we're missing. Right? In the same way, there's a lot of nature inside of us that we sometimes lose sight of in the busyness of everyday life. So yes, your original question was, is it hard for us to adapt, to slow down? Absolutely, right? But at the same time, I think we already introduced the notion that meditation is not easy to understand as a phenomenon, as a process. And we said going beyond the mind is one way to understand it, but ultimately meditation, this is perhaps the biggest misunderstanding, is not something we do. It isn't. It looks this way, like we sit down and there we are meditating. Well, not actually. We've just sat down and maybe, hopefully, we sit still. But that's not meditation. That is sitting still, right? So meditation is actually something that happens to us. It's not something that we even can do. It's not of our personal effort, for instance. It is not the result of our efforts. It's rather a state of being that arises when the conditions are met. The conditions for that state to arise. Like say the state of relaxation can only really arise under certain conditions, like not when you are at a busy intersection, right? Or when you are under stress, you'll have a hard time relaxing. In the same way, meditation requires certain conditions, including sitting still is actually helpful, especially in the beginning, and also focus. There's always something that we are taught, that we are guided to focus on in any meditation course or retreat. And different traditions choose different things. Different people find different things work better or worse for them. But ultimately there's always a meditation object, or better said, a concentration object. So sitting still, ideally closing the eyes, and focusing on something, those are the conditions. And the more we can maintain those conditions, the more we give space to the phenomenon of meditation to arise, for a meditative state to come about. And when it does, the amazing thing is really that there is nobody there doing it. So it is not a good way to say, I meditate. More precisely, one would say, meditation is happening. And when that is the case, it changes everything. And there's different stages to it. There's decades of going deeper available. It's not just one thing, and then you get there and everything is great. It's not that simple. But putting aside the agency, the control that we otherwise have in everyday life, and just being, for most of us is not an experience that we very often have, that we have access to, let alone that we can bring about at will. And so that is a very wholesome experience that can really go very deep inside of us.
Arjuna and Arpita, I found these 12 days of meditating with you, it was so difficult for me to try not to think. It was so difficult to control my thoughts, right? I remember for 3 consecutive days, I had in my mind a waffle, praline, and and ice cream, okay? And pistachio ice cream, okay? For 3 consecutive days, along with many other thoughts. So there it was quite clear to me that I cannot control my mind every time. I mean, like, I knew that, or I thought I knew that, but there I totally realized that I'm not controlling it. Not all the time. So we had this 2 hours meditation in the morning and then 2.5 hours meditation during the evening, and then if we would like to free practice, whatever, okay? So I had difficult times on meditating, not on meditating only, but on clearing my thoughts, right? Is there something to share with us if we would like to start meditating from tonight, from today? And I have millions of thoughts coming into my mind when I close my eyes, when I sit down, millions of thoughts coming, okay? Is there a tip, an advice, or something from your experience that can help me or anyone listening right now in order to start meditating at least for 5 minutes or for 10 minutes per day?
Well, first of all, I want to say that thinking about ice cream is completely normal during a meditation retreat. Nothing out of the ordinary here. We even had people that said on day 3, okay, I gotta go now. I think I'd rather go for the ice cream than for the silence and meditation. And I was like, okay, fair enough. So that is very normal. And we often also say that meditation, and especially meditation retreat, is mind training. And that is important to actually acknowledge, because it can be difficult, of course. If it's an environment that's completely out of our ordinary day-to-day life, and we are really asked to sit still and be in concentration for hours and hours a day, of course, at the beginning, it's difficult. And the mind is kind of bombarding us with everything to see what's going to stick. Is it going to be the gelato? Is it going to be, go home? Is it what's going to be? What's going to be the dramatic escape that the mind finds right now? But if I am to give one tip to someone that has never meditated, has been curious, is living in a city and kind of a really busy and fast-paced life, that would be to just take a couple of minutes every once in a while throughout the day and come into connecting with the body. Actually come into just feeling the sensations in the body right now and coming to connect with the breath. These are 2 very simple things. Just taking a breath, acknowledging the breath, acknowledging the body and the sensations in the body. Very simple things like feeling the chair I'm sitting in right now, or feeling how my feet are touching the ground, or feeling how my arms are touching these armrests, to really come back into the felt sense in the body and then to the breath.
Yeah, that's a very important approach. Perhaps to drop the notion that meditation is so very difficult. Because, yes, we cannot force meditation to occur. We can't. But that doesn't mean that it's difficult. It's actually extremely simple. Just like Arpita says, we don't have to try to get somewhere else, to have a certain experience, to be a certain person. Yeah, sometimes we get this impression from like self-help books or even instructions of certain teachers, but the beginning of virtually any spiritual practice is to be present with that which already is. And that is not an easy teaching, because the mind often thinks, well, what already is what I don't like. I'd rather have, if I am to be in the moment, can't it be a nice moment? Like, something enjoyable. That is very much the treacherousness of the mind, that we need to really start with the moment at hand, with the reality as it is right now, even if it's perhaps not entirely pleasant. But meditation begins from that which is already there. To be completely aware of the sensations in the body that we already have. Not to try and change the mind or stop thinking or get somewhere, but to be fully aware and present and content with what's already there. And if we were to do that, we'll notice, well, that is very simple, but we often doubt the efficacy of this. We're like, well, what would that possibly do? Amazingly, it does a lot. The longer we rest in that awareness of what is, the more it does for us. And so 5 minutes is great. 10 minutes is better. 5 minutes 3 times a day is a good approach, right? So we can squeeze little bits of that into the gaps in our life, when we are waiting at the checkout, when we are stuck in traffic, when we have, I don't know, an elevator ride. Those moments when we usually, habitually, nowadays, reach for the phone.
Exactly.
It would be useful to actually recognize, I have a moment. Let's just see what's going on. Breath is going in. Breath is going out. I feel a little cold. I feel sad. Or whatever it is. To start with what's actually present and to fully allow that. That is the beginning of meditation.
Every night we were closing our days with a 20-minute, 25-minute meditation that is called Metta Bhavana. Am I saying that correctly, Arpita? Okay,
yes.
Great. Why was that kind of meditation great for me? I want to share my experience. It's a meditation that I still follow 3 months after the retreat, so it means that it worked out for me. Number one, it was a guided meditation. I don't know, as a beginner, I need to be guided somehow. So actually, for me, I feel that it helps me in a way, right? So there we had Arpita saying some words on that about sharing love, right? Okay. And actually, I remember that we had 4 approaches, someone would say. Sending love to ourselves, right? Sending love to the people we love, right? Sending love to all beings, and sending love to those that bring us into difficult situation, challenge us. I could understand sending love to myself. I could, and I also liked sending love to the people that I love. Sending love to all beings, it was something that I could relate up to a point. But when I had to meditate on sending love, on offering to these people my pure thoughts, my clear energy, my love, my compassion, my respect, it was difficult at the beginning. At the end, it was so great for me because it allowed me to release myself from people and thoughts that kept me behind, of being angry, of being sad. So it helped me. But at the beginning, it was, and still is, for some people that I have into my mind, quite challenging to send love to a person that hurt me, that talked bad to me, whatever that was. From your side, why do you think this part of this meditation is important to include in your meditation people that have challenged you, people that might hurt you? Why do you think it's important to include these examples in the meditation?
The practice you mentioned, Metta Bhavana, also known as loving kindness practice, is actually considered one of the great perfections in the Buddhist tradition, because it is also a great purifier of the mind. And what you're describing is exactly this. We often generate a great amount of energy towards the people that challenge us, towards the people that serve us difficult situations. And so to actually purify the mind sufficiently to be able to send loving kindness and compassion to those people is incredible. It is easier to send loving kindness and compassion to the people we love, of course. For some of us, it might be more difficult to send loving kindness and compassion towards ourselves or to some of our family members, of course. So there is a great potential for purification and for healing there. And then this does expand towards all beings, which can feel rather abstract to some people. But as the practice unfolds, as we continue to cultivate loving kindness and compassion, we truly can feel how this loving kindness and compassion touches all beings in the world. Is really there. We are cultivating it for the benefit of all. And that's important to understand, that we are not meditating for our own sake. We are not cultivating loving kindness or mindfulness for our own sake. We are really doing it for everyone that comes into contact with us, and then on down the line, and for all beings, ultimately.
Arpita, would it be easy to share with us this 5 or 3 things that we were saying through Metta Bhavana? These questions, I mean, like, just to share an idea on may I...
Yeah, if it is towards ourselves, it would be, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be liberated. So that would be a short version. And then often I include a few more things, like may I remember my good fortune, may I be liberated from my suffering, whatever that suffering may be. And then we can do so also for the others. May they be happy, may they be peaceful, may they remember their good fortune.
So I remember how difficult it was at the beginning to me to say to someone that has brought me into difficult condition, may he, may she be happy, may he or she be peaceful, may they be liberated from their sufferings. So at the beginning, it was so difficult. As the days passed by, it was totally liberating for me also. And I believe that it still is every night. When I do that, it still gives me like one step. It gives me a push in order to do the next step into my life. And now that you were saying these questions, again, it brought me back there, that I was trying to convince myself actually to not only to think about it, but also to believe it. And not only think, may they be happy, but also believe that, yes, you want the people that have hurt you to be happy. You want the people that maybe you're not talking right now to be in a good situation, to have peaceful moments into their lives. So for me, as I had some months ago, I had a pretty bad situation in my personal life before I entered the retreat. I believe that this meditation helped me a lot to overpass it. And right now be at a great point with my emotions towards that bad situation that I had back in April. So for me, it worked, and it worked quite fine. Another question, yeah, of course.
This brings us to another way of understanding meditation that is not very well known, perhaps, and that is that, see, if we were to define the mind, it's actually not so easy. What is the mind really, right? Because suppose there is a moment where you don't think of anything. Is the mind still there? Yes, it is, right? So what is it if it's still there, even though you're not thinking of anything? So another way to understand the mind is that it's the sum total of all the patterns that were created through our upbringing and through our lives, through all the hardship we might have suffered, also all the joys we've experienced. All of these things create certain patterns that are basically set up for survival, for self-preservation. They are meant to protect us, to teach us, to give us a scaffolding, a guidance for future situations, right? Now, unfortunately, these patterns also cause a lot of trouble in the sense that we often act out of habit, or we act out of patterns in terms of, say, addiction or interpersonal relations, where it would be better if we were impartial, if we were not informed by past situations, but we could go into this new situation without any pre-existing pattern, right? So in meditation, we actually become aware of these patterns, and as we see them arise in the mind, we don't act them out, we don't act upon them, but rather we let them go. And in this way, we deprogram the mind. That is also a way of understanding meditation, to unlearn, to deprogram, not to put something else in there. And like your example of finding it difficult to send love to someone who caused us grief, that is, of course, a pattern that we hopefully overcome. And as you said from your own experience, it became weaker and it became easier to send this love. So you've become free of that pattern to some degree, at least. So as it happens, there's a lot of patterns in our minds, but through a practice of meditation, and there's so many different ways of doing this, we gradually release those patterns. And that is very much the notion of liberation in spirituality at large, that we empty the mind of its preconceived notions, that we become unburdened gradually.
Unburdened. Arjuna, one day throughout our daily lectures, morning lectures, I believe it was one of my most beloved points throughout the retreat, this 1 hour that you were talking to us, you have made a beautiful comment about karma. And what I had in my mind before that was that if I do good actions and if I help other people, I will have a good karma. And somehow this karma will come back to my life and it will help me develop, find great colleagues, develop my company, have a great relationship with my fiancé, right? And if I do bad actions, I have a bad karma. So life will punish me, right? You shared with us a totally different approach on what karma is and how we should respond to it. I was in silence, I remember, so I had so many questions into my mind, but I couldn't say anything, right? But hopefully till the end of the lecture, you covered all of my questions. Would you like to share briefly something about that? I don't know if it could be shared briefly, but it was something that I still have in my mind about that morning lecture that we had on karma.
Right. It's a very important topic because it affects very much the way we live every single day. In this way, it's relevant for everyone, regardless of even religion, background, occupation. It's very much at the core of how to live, right? Karma basically would inform how to live a good life. And now the origin of the word karma is just action with a specific focus on the effects of our actions, right? And so the teaching is not limited even to India, where the term karma stems from, but you can find the same teaching in many different traditions in some form or other. And in one word, usually it's understood as what goes around comes around, right? And so it is based on what you describe. If we do good things, we'll be rewarded. If we do bad things, we'll be punished one way or another, one fine day. If you look at the Christian traditions, much of that is actually outsourced, you could say, into the afterlife, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly, yes. Yeah, good example.
Because we don't have so much proof that it actually happens. Like, we have tons of counterexamples. If you look at the world, you see a lot of good people having a lot of hardship in their life. And a lot of less good people seemingly living comfortable, maybe even amazing lives as it appears from the outside, right? So we're perhaps we're a little confused, because on one hand, most people in the world recognize, okay, there are effects to our actions. It is not just random what we do. There seems to be a correlation between what we do and what we get for it. Yeah, this is, at least intuitively, most people would agree there is something like this. And the question is, how exactly does that happen? If in many cases, in many examples in the world, we see the opposite, or we don't, at least we don't see it properly happening. So on a deeper level, it is important to understand that karma can actually not be based on good and bad. That's really the major issue. Because if we look at actions, in order to be good, we'd have to know everything about that action. We'd have to know good or bad for who, good or bad from what perspective, under what circumstances. Like, we can easily think of examples where we thought something is really, really good. Like when we discovered oil 100 years ago, we're like, amazing, a huge source of energy. It can transform, and it did transform our civilization. Until we realized, oh, turns out pollution, oh, it's an issue, climate change, right? So looked great at first, turned out to be problematic. And we can come up with counterexamples and many examples of the good and bad not being so clearly defined. So it depends also on our cultural context, for instance. A lot of cultures say eating pork is completely fine. Some cultures say absolutely not. And so many examples we can think of where good and bad depend on certain factors. Cultural factors, time and space factors. Time is a big factor. To us, time is kind of this river of one thing after the other. From the perspective of the great masters of meditation, it wasn't really like that, but that's a different topic. Point being, we see good and bad as the basis for karma, when in actual fact, no action can be clearly defined as good or bad. What is good for one is probably bad for another, right? So karma, on the other hand, is a law of nature, it seems. It seems to be in the very fabric of reality. But good and bad are not constants, are not universally fixed parameters. We can't define any action or any reaction as clearly good or bad. What else could be the cause of karma then? If it's not good or bad, if good and bad are indeed relative, is there perhaps something else that is not relative, that defines indeed the outcome of every action? And there is indeed something. So I don't know if we want to tell people, or we could just leave them hanging.
For next year, for the next podcast, I think we should. It's
a hard thing to guess, right? If anybody's probably thinking now, what is he talking about?
I remember myself that day. I mean, like, please tell us. Please tell us. I mean, like, what's that I should do? I mean, like, I thought karma was that. I think karma was the other. And you go like, no, it's not like this. And I was hanging from your lips to say that.
Well, in order to figure it out, we need to look at what motivates us. Why do we act one way or another? What motivates every single action we do? And even that is not an easy question to figure out.
Exactly.
Not in simple terms, right? But so let's reveal it. There is actually something. It's quite obvious once you hear it. Why we do anything is because either we have an attachment or we have an aversion. Either we want something or we want to avoid something. That is the core motivation of everything we do. And it is not relative. It is not up to interpretation, but rather it's quite clear. Whatever we do, wherever we go, whatever we try to get, there's attachment there. Whatever we fear, what we'd like to avoid, there's repulsion. These are the forces that define karma. They actually create an imbalance in us. Whenever we act upon a desire it creates a subtle imbalance that we're not aware of, but that creates a reaction, a karmic repercussion, as it's called. And conversely, for anything we fear, we try to push away, we're creating an imbalance that actually needs to be resolved. So there's a lot of talk about liberation in spirituality, in many traditions. And one way to understand that liberation is a freedom from those imprints, from all the desires and aversions that we have allowed to form our mind, ultimately, our being.
So at the end of the day, it's what has to be done kind of way.
Because that's the question. What next? Desires and aversions, they just are what they are. What can we do about them? Can we possibly ignore them? Not easily, right? But it is true. If we aren't to act upon desire and aversion, what could we possibly be acting on instead? And there is really only one other force that can guide us, and that actually guides us really well if we allow it, and that is intuition. That is that little voice inside. We all know it, and yet science has no explanation for it, interestingly. But we've all had intuitive knowings, oh, I should do this and that, and then the mind is like, oh, but that would not be a good idea, so we don't do it. And 5 minutes later, we're like, oh, I knew it. Every single time, right? So intuition is this strange knowledge that comes to us from a deep source, that comes without arguments, that comes without pressure. It's almost like a gift that is offered to us, and that it doesn't impose itself. And so often we ignore it at our own peril. But funnily enough, if we do follow intuitive knowledge, every time we find that it is actually the course of action that is most beneficial for our own healing and awakening and that of others. That the purpose of intuition really is to guide us towards awakening, ultimately.
Reaching to the end, even if I do not want to, 2 last questions. When I was at your beautiful house where the retreat took place, I saw somewhere stating to have a mind unshaken by the world. What does that mean to you?
What comes to my mind right now is a phrase I believe probably everyone has heard. You can help me with how that translates to Greek. It's know thyself.
Το να, know thyself, it's like να φτάσεις πολύ κοντά στη γνώση του εαυτού σου. Yeah,
so at the end, if we are to really summarize what all this is about, it's about knowing ourselves, being curious about this human experience in a really honest way, in a very sincere way. And this brings to my memory actually what my mother said when she finished her first meditation retreat. She said she's a psychologist, and she was like, meditation retreats are amongst the best self-development things one can do for themselves, because it is an incredible opportunity to give ourselves the time and space to actually sit with ourselves and get to know ourselves deeply.
I'd given a speech about 2 months ago about this issue of getting to know ourselves better, and what I said and what I say every time at the beginning of the podcast, I say that it's this ongoing, endless journey towards getting to know ourselves better. Last question that I started to doubt when I came out from the retreat, since it has this great duality. As you can see at your cups, it says kings or pawns, which is our motto. And actually I have a tattoo on me stating this quote, kings or pawns. great duality. Nothing else, only king or only pawn, right? And I say this for the first time after the retreat, I started doubting that. Is that king or pawns? Yeah. When I found the answer, I will do another podcast for that. Till then, we close the podcast with everyone that joins us here with that question. What do they believe on this statement, on this quote? Kings or pawns? You're free to say whatever you believe about this quote. So
I'd have to go with the words of the Buddha. Both is best.
At the end of the day, one of the aims of any contemplation or meditation practice of any tradition is to transcend any duality. So this may serve for some time until it doesn't serve anymore.
I will not cry, okay? I will discipline myself from crying. Thank you so much for our today's beautiful discussion. We are already here for 53 minutes. The usual time that we hold our podcasts are between 25 and 35 minutes. We could do another 50 minutes and another 50 minutes. Yeah, but we will have, I believe, the opportunities to do that in the future. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us and happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We will close the podcast together, but give me a second to close the podcast in Greek. And σήμερα λοιπόν ήταν ένα διαφορετικό podcast και για εμένα. Ήταν στην αγγλική με δύο ανθρώπους που πραγματικά με βοήθησαν να αλλάξω πολλά πράγματα στη ζωή μου, στη διατροφή μου, στον τρόπο που κινούμαι, στον τρόπο που αντιλαμβάνομαι τη ζωή. Φτάνουν 12 μέρες για να σου αλλάξουν τη ζωή, πράγματα που δεν μπορούσα να λύσω για 2,5 χρόνια από τότε που πέθανε ο πατέρας μου. Βεβαίως, όχι 12 μέρες, μια στιγμή μπορεί να συμβεί αυτό, μέσα σε μια στιγμή, αν είσαι στο κατάλληλο περιβάλλον με τους κατάλληλους ανθρώπους. Εγώ ήμουν τόσο τυχερός που βρήκα την Άρπιτα και τον Άρζουνα κατά τύχη, δηλαδή απλώς διάλεξα ένα retreat και πήγα. Νιώθω ιδιαίτερα ευγνώμων γι' αυτό και η δική μου προτροπή είναι να εξερευνάτε, είναι να κάνετε αυτό το οποίο νιώθετε τη συγκεκριμένη χρονική στιγμή. Τον Αύγουστο εγώ δεν ένιωθα ότι θέλω να πάω κάπου σε κάποιο νησί, ήθελα να περάσω χρόνο με μένα και αυτό αυτή τη στιγμή πραγματικά με έχει σώσει. Οπότε να κάνετε αυτό το οποίο λέει η καρδιά σας, όχι αυτό το οποίο λένε οι συνθήκες τριγύρω σας. Νομίζω ότι αυτό μπορεί να μας σώσει αρκετές φορές και να μας οδηγήσει στο δρόμο που πραγματικά έχουμε ανάγκη να ζήσουμε και να βιώσουμε. Ευχαριστούμε την Keybooks, τις εκδόσεις Keybooks, τον χορηγό μας. Κάθε Τετάρτη από τις 5 ώρα το πρωί ένα νέο podcast διαθέσιμο σε Apple και Google Podcasts, καθώς επίσης και στο Spotify. Ευχαριστούμε θερμά που μας κρατάτε στις πρώτες θέσεις. Δεν είναι τίποτα δεδομένο για εμάς στη λίστα του ελληνικού Spotify. Το εκτιμάμε από καρδιά μας. Είμαστε εδώ κάθε φορά με ειλικρίνεια, με αγάπη, με πάθος. Να κάνουμε μαζί. Δεν σας κοιτάζουμε από απέναντι. Μαζί να κάνουμε αυτά τα βήματα για να γίνουμε καλύτεροι. Και πάμε να κλείσουμε εδώ μαζί με τους καλεσμένους μου, με τον τρόπο που κάνουμε συνήθως. So what we do every time, we close the podcast by saying together, till next time, keep speaking, as we are the speakers, right? So you ready to do that together? So 1, 2, 3.
Till next time, keep speaking.